Hi, in this chapter of the book, we're going to go through Europe. Thought there were some neat pictures here that demonstrate both the physical, cultural, urban geography of Europe. These are the Dolomites in northern Italy. This is Paris, France. The Arc de Triomphe, I believe. I was here in summer of 2017. I think I have some pictures in some of my videos there. This is Venice, Italy. Here's a map. And we'll talk about the relative size and population and whatnot of it, but this is the area that we're looking at. Technically, the continent of Europe extends over to the Ural Mountains in Russia, but for all intents and purposes that we're going to talk about here, we'll look at that. You'll see I've got a couple of videos that I've posted. I have one of Iceland, one of Paris. Hopefully I'll get some in the future from my travels to Italy and northwest France. But for now, you can see some of the places that I've visited in Europe and my impression of it. You can see the relative size of it. So it's relatively small compared to United States and, obviously North America here. But it's very diverse. It's got about 500 million people within 37 countries. It's got large cultural diversity, and it's the birthplace of the nation state, meaning areas or political states that have the same general culture throughout. We've got the European Union, and this is a supranational organization. Right now it's about 28 countries, but we've heard recently in the news about something called Brexit, where Britain looks to leave the European Union. Environmentally diverse, it's got a complex geology. Issues with air pollution, water pollution, environmental problems. So we'll talk about those a little bit. So some of the coastlines here with the rising sea level. Some of the issues here in the Netherlands or Holland. Rising sea levels are going to claim lands, but there's been a lot of engineering efforts in the Netherlands to prevent that. Acid rain in places like Poland and Eastern Europe, these former Soviet bloc countries. And then air quality issues, from some of the manufacturing regions in this area. And these just address some of the, environmental issues that we've dealt with. Issues from the Iron Curtain, Chernobyl in '86. There's also volcanic activity because there is a plate boundary that separates the African plate from the Eurasian plate. And then we've got a divergent spreading center up here in Iceland. So we have, droughts, earthquakes all throughout the Balkans and in southern Italy. This is Surtsey in Iceland. So like I said before, basically Iceland's literally being spread apart through the middle. Okay? Because one part of Iceland is on one plate, the other's on another plate. It's at a spreading center or a divergent plate boundary, and it's being literally spread apart. This was a picture in the summer of 2017 when I visited. And they have geysers. There's a national park called Geyser National Park. So you can see a lot of these thermal features where literally the land is being spread apart. We have moraines, which are piles of glacial debris from the glacial retreat. We've got fjords up in northern Europe, glacially formed flooded river inlets, valley inlets. We'll talk about the climate in a little bit. But it's relatively attractive to tourists, but can be problematic for agriculture. So you can see the climate regimes we have here. We've got some Bs, a little bit of B in Spain, but you got your more temperate climate here. You got your Cs, and then you got some of your Ds. So Mediterranean agriculture takes advantage of the climatic conditions. Here are palm trees in Dublin, even though when we go back, if we actually look at the latitude of Dublin, it's relatively high compared to the rest of the United States. New York City is at about 40, 41. So you see Spain here, It's a much different climate regime than we have for the same latitude, but the global circulation patterns that we have are much different that affect Europe than the United States. So you can see some of the issues, environmental issues, water pollution, that I kind of expounded on before. Like I mentioned before, rising seas. This global climate change is going to have a dynamic effect on some of the water bodies. And so we have reclaiming the Dutch coastline, and these are called polders. These are protected and reclaimed landscapes. And you can see an example of these at a high scale for the country of the Netherlands, kind of tucked in between Germany, Belgium, and to the southwest, France. We have population density in the core and the periphery. So population densities are higher in historical industrial cores of Western Europe, a little bit lower in Eastern Europe. But here's a dot density map that shows where population is concentrated. Very densely populated here in Belgium, Netherlands, Eastern Germany. We have decreasing populations in places like Denmark and Italy. The rate of natural increase is actually going down as opposed to going up. So every day in a couple of those countries, more people are dying every day than being born. And then migration. Okay? EU's attempts to establish, common migration policies, and we see those through to today. Especially, this whole idea of distance decay. It's much harder for someone to emigrate to the United States. It's a lot easier to do this in Europe because it's relatively close from places like Iraq or Syria or the Middle East. So you can see where some of these people are coming from and going to, and we can still see these patterns persistent today. And this talks about it at a much different scale, okay? From the Dutch to Caribbean, okay? Or to the United States or whatever. It's for a number of reasons. This is the potato famine. This is a combination of environmental as well as government policies. At the time, Ireland had 8 million people. Today, it has about 4.7 million. It wasn't even until the 21st century where Ireland had a positive rate of natural increase, more immigration than emigration. This talks about some of the settlement and growth patterns in the past and how they're looking towards now. This is a picture from Ireland, Castle, and some of the patterns that we've seen there. You can see the high population densities. This is a picture of Leaning Tower of Pisa. I was here in March of 2018. Thought this was really interesting. Pisa was one of the big university centers for all of Europe, one of the oldest universities in Europe. But it's more renowned for this Leaning Tower, which was built in the 1300s. Okay? And then underground subsistence, which has kept that going. Okay? And there's been engineering efforts to kind of take the leaning out of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. But some of the similarities, it's got a central core suburban ring. Some of the differences between European and American cities. The differences in the United States, we've got high suburban density. In the United States, we have a lot less public transportation. In the United States, we have a lot more land, so we're able to just build out instead of taking advantage of or optimizing the land that they do have. So I thought that's, much, much different. We have these beltways that go around cities. European cities don't have that luxury. I thought this was interesting. In 2017, I went to a city called Angiers. It's about 150, 200,000 people, and it's got public transportation running throughout the city. A public transportation line running throughout the city. So as you can imagine, in places like North Carolina or Virginia, how much time politics would go into putting in a light rail line or putting in new highways. And it's done relatively easy in these places, in much smaller places. This talks about the geography of languages. And you can see some of these isolated languages here. We have one here called Basque, situated between France and Spain. But we can see the different language families throughout. We got some major, minor, Indo-European from the language family. You can see Gaelic or Irish in Ireland. And having been to Europe, a lot of people speak English, which is good for us. This talks about the geographies of religion. You can see the modern religions. Geography of Judaism, Protestant revolt. Secularization of Europe, movement away from historically prominent organized religions of Europe, most notably Roman Catholicism. And we can see some of these interfaith regions these days, like we talked about with sub-Saharan Africa, northern Nigeria, between Islam and non-Islam. We can see with Protestants and Catholics in Ireland, with the separate creation of Northern Ireland, which belongs to the Great Britain as opposed to the independent country of Ireland. And we can see the legacy of Rome with the geopolitical background. So this is a picture that I took of the Roman Colosseum. This was in March of 2018. And then the rise of nationalism and nation states. So between 1860 and 1900, we've got overseas trade, scientific revolution, the Reformation, and then redrawing the map. Okay, so between, in the 1900s, you'll see countries like Austria-Hungary appear on the map and disappear. Poland will be there and disappear. And we've got the Cold War. So we've got the US, the UK, the USSR, and kind of divided between those who've sided with US and UK, and then this USSR. And then this Cold War thaw with the Germany. There used to be East and West Germany, now there's just one Germany. There used to be a Czechoslovakia, now it's a Slovakia and Czech Republic. A lot of it's due to this political instability in the USSR. And then how is that going to change things? We can see now that the breakup of Yugoslavia, and so even now we're starting to get these new countries as a result of those. We've got Slovenia, we've got Bosnia. Kosovo is one of the newest countries in the world. And so some of the problems in Yugoslavia, even to this day, the whole, we use the term Balkanization. So this idea of small-scale independence. We'll talk about this a little bit more with Russia. We have places like Ossetia, Kazakhstan, which is its own country, but are some of these minor republics going to be declared from parts of those regions in the Caucasus region? So you can see kind of the breakup in 1991 and where it's moving towards today. This talks a little bit about the economic geography with your newer industrial regions and your older industrial regions in Europe. As does this. And then just getting into the economics. The European Union, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Like I said before, there's the numbers in the high 20s right now. So what is it going to be in the future? We have other supranational organizations such as NATO. And then you can see the European influence throughout the world. So, places like Macau used to be owned by Portugal until the late 1990s. Hong Kong. So you can see the footprint throughout the world of a lot of these European countries. Even in France, there's a French Guiana in South America. A number of these islands throughout the Indian Ocean used to or currently belong to some of these European countries. We see St. Helena. We see St. Pierre, which belongs to France, right off the coast of Canada. And like we've talked about those with the United States, where we have, Marianas Islands and Guam and Samoa. Same case over here with French Polynesia and Tahiti. So that's about it for the chapter on Europe.